As indicated in the thumbnail, there are only 2 weeks left of the CFL regular season. I almost don't remember what it's like to film in this room, and the curse of the basement picks has finally been broken. What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's finest on YouTube, blockbuster_guy on Twitter, fueled as always by the incredible folks at NerdTees, and welcome to week 20 of my weekly CFL football pick show for the 2019 CFL regular season and postseason, and only 2 weeks to go. As a matter of fact, from this point right now, there are only 13 games remaining in the CFL season, up to and including Grey Cup 107. It's going to be over soon. Heck of a week last week in week 19, including going 4-0 straight up with the picks and 3-1 against the spread. Both of those we like to see, and both of those got the overall seasons back up to the 70% and 60% watersheds that I've been looking for all season long. Straight up 51-22 now on the season, pretty well dead set on 70%. Against the spread, 44-28-1. Pretty well dead set on 60%. So we're right back to where we want to be, but now we have to continue pushing forward to get better. 8-4 across all the CFL picks from last week has us 129, 89, and 1 on the season, so just below our mark of 60% that we're looking for overall on the year, currently at 58.9. And I sat down and I did a little maths for us, and this is what needs to happen. So I've been talking about it all season, that my goal for the end of the year was to be 60% across all of my CFL picks for the entire season. In order to do that, in the final 13 games of the year, up to and including the Grey Cup, I need to go 26-13. So that's 2 out of 3. 2 out of 3 ain't bad. We're certainly more than capable of doing that, but that's the pace that I need to keep from here until the end of the Grey Cup in order to be at 60%. But in addition to that, I kind of had a stretch goal, if you will. Like, I kind of had an idea in my head that, man, how awesome would it be to be 60% by the end of the regular season? Now, of course, I only have 2 weeks left to do that, but I ran the numbers and it's not that unachievable. In the last 2 weeks, I have to go 17-7. If I go 17-7 in the last 2 weeks, I'm at 60% by the end of the regular season. That's an 8-4 and a 9-3. We know, if you've been watching this series all year long, that's within the range. We're more than capable of doing that. We've done that on a relatively consistent basis for much of this season. So a 9-3 and an 8-4. If I go above a 9-3, that just puts us in better position. So 17-7 by the end of the regular season, I think we can do that. As I did last week, and as I think I'll continue to do for the rest of the year, we're going to move the fantasy stuff to the end of the video like I did last week. We're just going to get right into these games, the remaining 2 weeks of the regular season. Our week 20 schedule looks like this in the CFL. We got a rematch from the game that closed last week. We got the Calgary Stampeders in Winnipeg this time to take on the Blue Bombers. Hamilton is in Montreal, but in what could really be a preview of that East Final. Ticats against the Alouettes. Ottawa is in Toronto to take on the Argos, and Saskatchewan travels to Edmonton, where a certain quarterback just got pulled off the 6-game injured list to take on the Eskies. Let's start in Winnipeg. Stamps versus the Blue Bombers in a rematch from last week. Calgary wins that game from last week, 37-33. That was in Calgary. And the Stamps just weathered a big storm in the second quarter. The Blue Bombers put up 24 points in the second quarter, and Calgary weathered that. You could just tell, but you just tell by watching this team, they don't panic. There's no fear in what they do, and they don't get overwhelmed by the moment. They've been in so many big ones. They don't get overwhelmed by the fact that a team just put up 24 on them in the second quarter heading into the half. And over the course of the full game, they proved to be the better team. In Winnipeg's case, they did lead this game 27-19 at the half, buoyed by that 24-point second quarter, but had just 10 first downs in the entire second half, only 3 of which came in the fourth quarter. They had a turnover on downs, they had an interception, and just held to 2 field goals for the rest of the game by that Stampeders defense. Bo Levi Mitchell, a workman-like performance. 337 pass yards on 67% passing, had 3 touchdown passes, all 3 of them going to Reggie Begelton, so a huge game for Begelton. He did throw a pick, but look, when you throw over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, I guess a single interception's pretty forgivable. Josh Huff, notably leading the way in terms of receiving for the Stamps, 6 catches for $121 through the air. Nice breakout performance for him. On Winnipeg's side, Strevler was once again, I would describe Strevler as mediocre, certainly as a passing quarterback. And then, of course, suffered a bit of an ankle injury there, struggled through the end of the game through the 4th quarter. Worth noting, Zach Collaros, who was just traded to Winnipeg from Toronto, Zach Collaros took first-team reps in practice yesterday, that being Tuesday, so there's a real question mark on the quarterback position for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, not just for this game, but moving forward into the playoffs. Calgary in that game had several drives that were sustained by bad penalties being taken on the part of the defense of the Blue Bombers, but that's one of those situations. You got to be good to be lucky, and you usually got to be lucky to be good. So you had a couple of moments in that game where the Stamps offense kind of got bailed out by the Bombers defense taking a bad penalty. And on the Bombers side, this is their last chance to dance before the playoffs. They have a bye next week. This is their last game of the season. It's the final home game of the regular season. This has to be the game of their season. I wouldn't necessarily go so far as to say this is an official policy of mine in terms of making picks, but the more I think about it, the more I think I should make it one. I can't pick with a team who I don't know who their starting quarterback is going to be, especially against another elite team in their own division that knows them very well, plays them multiple times a year. I just can't pick against the team who I know what I'm getting at the quarterback position in favor of the team that I don't even know who's going to be under center. So obviously you know where I'm going with this one. I got to go Calgary. Let's take the Stamps. They don't need this game necessarily quite as much, maybe from a momentum perspective, as Winnipeg does. They certainly need it in the standings because Saski's right there. But we're going to take the Stamps in this one. Let's take Calgary in Winnipeg to beat the Blue Bombers. On the line, Bombers are 2.5-point dogs at home, which I actually kind of expected this number to be larger than that, given that we don't know who's going to be playing quarterback for them. I expected this number to be somewhere up in, a 3.5 or a 4, even though the game is in Winnipeg. So I'm very happy to lay 2.5 points on the team that I basically know is the better football team. So I'm going to take Calgary minus 2.5 in Winnipeg. Total in the game set at 47.5 points. I think I'm still going to lean over on it. It's 2 teams that can play some pretty darn good defense, but haven't necessarily been doing so over the last 4 games. Defense has been fine, but hasn't exactly been lighting the world on fire. This is a relatively low number that I just don't really want to sit here and sweat, so we're going to go over 47.5 points in Calgary, Winnipeg. Let's go to Montreal now, where I mentioned an arguable preview of the East Final here. The Hamilton Ticats in Montreal to take on the Alouettes. Of course, if this was the East Final, the game would be taking place in Hamilton, but still matchup of the same teams. Ticats 13-3, winners of 4 straight games. They've doubled up opponents in scoring, better than doubled up opponents in scoring over that 4-game win streak. And they just kept it rolling last week. 33-12 victory for Hamilton over the Ottawa REDBLACKS. That game was in Hamilton. Again, just keep on rocking me, Hammy, instead of keep on rocking me, baby, because I don't own the rights to that. Ticats roll. They set a franchise record in that game for wins in a season with their 13th win. This is a 450 passing yard showcase for Dane Evans. He did only have 1 touchdown, but it was a 60-yard bomb. It was a little wobble a little bit, but it was a bomb that had to go 30-40 yards in the air to Brandon Banks. He took it in stride, down the field, touchdown. You are not catching that guy. It was an excellent performance for Dane Evans and for Brandon Banks. 7 catches, $116, and that touchdown. But it's the Ticats defense that I think is playing even more remarkably than the offense is. A stifling defense that allowed a bad REDBLACKS team, but still 162 total yards of offense in the whole game. That's crazy. A really good defensive performance. They forced the REDBLACKS to punt 9 times in that game. They registered 3 quarterback sacks on Will Arndt, as well as 4 knockdowns of passes in the secondary. That defense is clicking. On Montreal's side, they survived what turned into a second half shootout after having, a pretty comfortable lead going into halftime of that game against the Argos last week. They win that game 27-24 at home, but they required a field goal miss by Krapigna. I don't know how to pronounce his name. I feel bad. I don't want to call it like Krapigna, but I don't know how to pronounce the last name of the Argos kicker. But it required him missing a 51-yard field goal for that game to not go into overtime. And speaking of showcase quarterback performances, a near 300 total yard and 3 touchdown performance from Vernon Adams. All 3 touchdowns were passing touchdowns, and they went to 3 different receivers, Davier Posey, Jeremiah Johnson, as well as Quan Bray. So 3 different guys pulling in touchdowns. He spread the ball around very well, did Vernon Adams. Excellent quarterback matchup here. And where we talked about how the defense was so good for the Ticats, the defense will certainly be the Achilles heel, I think, for Montreal, not only in this game, but down the stretch in the playoffs. They gave up 405 total yards in this game to the Argos. So it worries me what an offense like Hamilton might be able to, 500 total yards. I don't think that's completely out of the question with how the Ticats offensively are playing right now, but it's the defensive side that Montreal really needs to worry about, really needs to hyper focus on down the stretch and into the postseason. While the Ticats definitely do not need these last 2 games, they can finish 13-5. They're still going directly to the East Final. So they don't need these 2 games, but if I'm the Ticats, I'm very careful about who I give momentum to. The Montreal Alouettes are not a team I want to give any momentum to because I know there's a pretty good chance that in 3 weeks' time, in the East Final, I'm going to have to play them in a playoff game for the right to go to the Grey Cup. So I'm very careful about who I hand momentum out to willy-nilly here at the end of the year. I don't think Hamilton's going to do that, at least not in this game. Next week, I could totally see them resting their starters. But this week, I think they're going to play this game as if it is that East Final. And I got to take the Ticats to win. They're just playing too good right now. Let's take Hamilton on the road in Montreal to beat the Alouettes. On the line, much like the Blue Bombers, the Alouettes are 2.5-point dogs at home. Another number that I kind of expected to be a little bit higher, just given how incredibly the Ticats are playing right now on both sides of the ball. So again, I'm more than happy to bite on that. I will lay the 2.5 points on the better football team. Let's take Hamilton -2.5 in Montreal. Total in the game set at 53.5 points. I do think this game stays under. I personally only capped it around a low 50, so 50, 51. Hamilton's only allowing 16 points a game over their last 4. They are giving up nothing on the defensive side, so I just think this game stays under. It might only be by a couple of points, but that's just been a trend this season. We're going to stick under 53.5 points in Montreal Hamilton. And before we move on to the second half of our games this week, I will take the opportunity, as I always do, to pump the tires of my wonderful friends at NerdTees. Ladies and gentlemen, nerdtees.ca, you've been hearing it all season. Go to nerdtees.ca and use that promo code BWFinest. That is going to save you 15% at checkout, and you're going to get free shipping on any order in Canada over $75. Excellent deal, excellent value. If you're one of my many viewers in the United States, 2 clicks of a button and everything is in US dollars for you. Today's blend is one of the original blends that really turned me on to NerdTees, and it's root beer. Smells exactly like a hot cup of root beer, and you think, why in the world would I want to try that? Try it, and you'll find out. Root beer, just one of the many, many incredible blends that NerdTees has in their arsenal. Learn for yourself. Go to nerdtees.ca. Use that promo code BWFinest. Save your money. Get your free shipping. Find yourself something to love, or find someone you love something to love just in time for Christmas. You can do it at nerdtees.ca. When you look at a matchup of 2 3-13 teams, you can only help but think, what a toilet bowl. But maybe it is, but I would certainly say that one turd is larger than the other. Let's go to Toronto now, where the Argos are going to play host to the Ottawa REDBLACKS, losers of 9 consecutive games since winning their 3rd game of the season back when Methuselah had a rookie card. Over their last 4 games, they've been more than doubled up in terms of the scoring, getting outscored 31-14 over their last 4, dropping that 33-12 decision in Hamilton last week. And again, it was as expected. This is a football team that simply does not have the weaponry or the firepower to compete with the vast majority of teams in this league. Are they going to be competitive with Toronto? I think so, but define competitive. Over the last couple of weeks, I've really been pumping the tires of Will Arndt, saying Will Arndt deserved starts. I've seen enough. I think I've seen enough of Will Arndt, especially after that game last week. He still has a lower interception percentage than Dominique Davis does, so he's not turning the ball over on average as much as one of their other options. But the quarterback efficiency just is not there. It's far and away the lowest efficiency number on this team. I've seen enough. Go to one of the other ones for the last couple of games of the season. And then in the offseason, that's your primary objective. Figure out this quarterback problem, the situation that you have. I don't think the answer is in your room right now. You're going to have to figure it out. One player I was impressed with, though, Canadian running back Brendan Gillanders, who over the last 2 games, he's only had 13 carries, but he's averaging 5 yards a carry on those carries, and he's added 9 catches for 56 yards receiving. That's a guy that I can certainly get behind and get invested with, like an RJ Harris, somebody that's actually playing like they want to be there. And I've been really impressed over the last couple of games with Brendan Gillanders. I hope he keeps it going. For the Toronto Argos, also 3-13 on the season. However, they have at least won in the last couple of calendar months, which is nice. They did drop that 3-point decision in Montreal last week that we talked about. And despite the loss and the very slow start, I mean, they were down 13-3 at the half, so they started really slowly. It was a pretty darn solid 60-minute effort. Very clean game from McLeod Bethel-Thompson. 342 yards passing on 78% completion percentage. So that's an excellent game from the quarterback position. 2 touchdowns, did not throw a pick. Also added a rushing touchdown on 4 carries. He had 3 receivers in that game that had at least 8 catches and at least 75 yards. That's an excellent performance. As I mentioned before, Krapina missing 2 field goals in that game, and that's 6 points, and that's the difference between a win and a loss. Now, 2 of those were from 50 plus. So, I mean, they're not exactly the easiest kicks in the world to make, but on average, you would expect your kicker to make most of those. But the fact that he had 2 misses from 50 plus, that was the difference in what was a tighter than expected football game. This is not a deep analysis. I'm not taking the lesser of the 2 teams on the road. That's not deep. I'm just not doing it. So I'm going to be taking the Toronto Argos at home here to pick up a win. On the line, Argos are 5-point favorites in this game. And I might shock a couple of people with this, but I honestly think that's a fairly accurate representation of the difference between these 2 teams right now. Certainly on the offensive side of the ball. At least they've got a quarterback that can make some plays. At least they've got more than one receiver that looks like he gives a damn. So I think I'm going to have to lay those points. It kind of feel, but I think I'm going to have to lay the points. Let's take Toronto -5 at home to cover against Ottawa. Total in the game, 52.5 points. I've got this capped around a high 40, maybe it pushes 50. So I do kind of like the under here. And neither of these teams are scoring above 20 points a game over their last 4 games. So the offenses have kind of gone ice cold here. So I feel fairly good about telling you to stay under on that one. We're going to stay under 52.5 points in Toronto, Ottawa. And the last game we're going to look at sees the Riders traveling to Edmonton to take on the Eskimos. The Riders got back in the win column last week. They've won 3 of their last 4, defense playing very well, offense playing very well. Picked up a 27-19 victory in BC against the Lions. A half-dozen sack performance for the Saskatchewan Roughriders, and the defense absolutely shined in that game. It was a solid win, but one that certainly can be improved upon in certain areas. Of note, William Powell just 3 rushing yards short of his 3rd straight 1,000-yard rushing season and only needs 84 receiving yards to set a new career high in receiving yards. I think he's going to do both of those things over the next 2 weeks. The rushing yards, obviously, but 84 receiving yards in 2 weeks, I think it's a reasonable total. But like I said, that win can certainly be improved upon. I'm not in love with the ball security issues. They fumbled the ball 3 times in this game. I think they lost at least 2 of them. So not a fan of the ball security. And I'm not a fan of the penalties. 8 penalties for 65 yards. This has been a recurring theme with this Riders team all season. I think I've talked about it almost a half dozen times on this show. That needs to be cleaned up. For the Eskimos, they evened their record last week at 8 and not last week, the week before, back in week 18, because they're coming in off their bye. Back in week 18, they evened their record at 8-8, 19-6 victory over the BC Lions. So both of these teams coming off of the same opponent. Now, Edmonton had the luxury of playing that game at home. That was the game, of course, that Edmonton secured their playoff berth, so they're playoff bound, and Trevor Harris coming back off of the 6-game injured list. Does that mean he plays this week? It probably. Does that mean he's rusty? Almost certainly. Shaq Cooper in the run game coming up big without CJ Gable, who did not play in this game. 21 total touches, 105 total yards, and a rush touchdown, which in this game was all the points that they needed to beat BC. Edmonton is now guaranteed to travel to Montreal for the East crossover. So they're going to play in Montreal against the Alouettes in the first round of the playoffs. The Eskimos, of note to this point in the season, 5-3 against the East Division, so they have a winning record, but they're only 3-5 on the road. And I can't remember right off the top of my head if Edmonton plays a road game next week, but if they do, they're certainly going to want to win that game. I think this is back-to-back-to-back road games for the Saskatchewan Roughriders, which is a tall order for any team to have to go through. However, again, you're looking at a quarterback where it's either Logan Kilgore, who hasn't been very good, or Trevor Harris, who hasn't played in 6-7 weeks, coming off of an injury, has to be rusty. Sasky is still fighting for that potential bye week, or at the very least getting to play a home playoff game. So I think we're going to be looking at the Riders in this one. I don't think this is a game that the Riders can afford to drop. So we're going to take Saskatchewan. I'm going to go with my gut. Take the Riders on the road in Edmonton to beat the Eskimos. On the line, the Eskies are a 1.5 dog at home after the line opening with Edmonton as a 1.5 favorite. So it's crossed the 0 there, which is definitely something to look at. But if I honestly like Saskatchewan to win the game, I think I'd be an idiot to not lay a 1.5. So I think we're going to lay a 1.5 and take Sasky minus 1.5. Total in the game set at 48. I think this is a pretty darn perfect total. Pretty well a coin flip as far as I'm concerned, but I think I got to stay under on it because I don't know what I'm going to get out of that Eskimos offense. Is CJ Gable going to play? Is it going to be Logan Kilgore or Trevor Harris? If it's Harris, what's Harris going to look like? So, especially with Sasky's defense playing as well lately as it is, let's go under 48 points in Edmonton, Saskatchewan. There you go, folks. Those are your picks for week 20 of the CFL season in 2019. We'll go over the picks here with you one more time. We've got Calgary on the road in Winnipeg to beat the Blue Bombers, and we're laying 2.5 points on the favorite, which is Calgary, in a game that goes over 47.5. I got the Hamilton Tiger Cats on the road in Montreal beating the Alouettes, and we are laying 2.5 points on the favored Ticats in a game that stays under 53.5. We have the only home team of the week we have winning. We got the Toronto Argos at home beating the Ottawa REDBLACKS, and we are laying a full 5 points on the Argos at home as favorites in a game that stays under 52.5. And in the week finale, we have the Saskatchewan Roughriders on the road in Edmonton beating the Eskimos, and we are laying a 1.5 on the favored Roughriders in a game that stays under 48 points. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching the Week 20 episode. And, we're thinking of a couple of special things here for down the stretch and into the playoffs, including something I think very interesting that we will do next week. If not interesting, hopefully exciting. Keep an eye on my Twitter at @blockbuster_guy, and I'll make an announcement about that in the coming days. That's it for me, Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, @blockbuster_guy on Twitter, fueled as always by the incredible folks at NerdTees. Thank you for watching. Enjoy week 20, and then we got the last week of the regular season coming up.